I'm gonna tell you right now. Right now. This is from her father. Her father. You bunch of lying no good punks, and I know who it's coming from because I've traced it, and you've been reported to cyber police because I've traced it. Consequences will never be the same because I've traced it, and you've been reported to cyber police because I've traced it. You'll be arrested. Any conversation. Well, guess what? My daughter's not lying, and I'm not gonna put up with any of you people's crap. If you ain't got something nice to say about my daughter, then keep your mouth shut. Keep your mouth shut. And any more of your comments and put it on there will be caught and will be bound. You will have to deal with the police, cause you done goofed. Cause you done goofed. Because I've traced it, and you've been reported to cyber police because I've traced it. Consequences will never be the same because I've traced it, and you've been reported to cyber police because I've traced it. You'll be arrested. End of conversation.
What up, y'all? Your boy Blew Up on here. I'm going to go ahead and give Amy a call.
Oh, hey.
What's up, Amy?
Not much. Ninja, just hanging out waiting for you to get back home.
I'm home.
What's wrong, Ninja?
Nothing. I'm just smoking a cigar.
Does that taste good, Ninja?
Yeah.
Everything okay, Ninja?
Yep.
Everything okay now, Ninja?
Pretty much.
Yeah, okay, babe.
What up, Stu? Nobody wants to buy you a beer, Blue. I know. You saw that stream from earlier? No one wants to buy little old boy Blue a beer.
Don't remember seeing any dream earlier. Ninja? What happened? I didn't understand that joke. Ninja? What happened, Ninja?
Yeah, I just had some Oreos and milk.
Is everything okay, Ninja?
Yeah.
I didn't understand what you meant by yeah. What's going on, Ninja?
Nothing. I'm just chilling.
What do you mean by that, Ninja?
I'm a little upset I couldn't raise any money to get my meds earlier. And the pharmacy's closed tomorrow because it's Thanksgiving.
Sorry to hear that. Ninja, what happened? That sounds nice. Ninja, I hope everything goes smoothly.
Probably might give out belt tomorrow, but you know what? I'm gonna answer in the sitting room because this one, it bores me.
But you would never again. You would never again. Jamie had parlayed her natural good looks into a steady income. She pulled in better than $1,000 a week, dancing for exclusive private parties in and around Chicago.
When Jamie first told us that she was going into dancing entertainment, it was a little bit shocking, you know, but she explained to us how it was going to work. We felt a little bit more comfortable because our main concern really wasn't the type of work she was doing, it was for her safety. Once she reassured us that she'd have somebody accompanying her at all times, her bodyguard, we felt a little bit more comfortable.
I don't think so. It's okay.
If she went into a place and the atmosphere wasn't right, either because the people had been drinking too much or something, they just float up and leave.
Right.
On Sunday, October 27th, 1991, Jamie didn't feel well. She canceled her bookings. She rented a couple of videotapes. She called a friend. That is what we know. Last night, Jamie Santos was alive.
I did later this weekend.
The call for help came the next morning, roughly 11:30 a.m.
No time. Send an ambulance to 1765 Stonehenge Court in Wheeling immediately. It's a young woman. She's not breathing. She's turning blue.
Paramedics found Jamie in her bed. There were obvious signs of a stroke, yet Jamie's head was carefully propped on a pillow. She had not been raped.
Yeah, I'm bored still.
With no eyewitnesses, no fingerprints, nothing that would yield a DNA profile. The only lead was a male voice on the 911 tape. No one in Jamie's family could identify the caller. Investigators could not even determine whether he was the killer or simply a passerby.
There's a possibility the 911 caller could be an innocent bystander that stumbled upon this. There's evidence of a struggle. Possibly somebody could have heard a struggle. Possibly somebody could have seen somebody running from the area, seen an open door.
Hello.
The 911 caller could be afraid to come forward, thinking that they'll be accused of being a killer when in fact, they were bystanders.
However, in this perplexing case, police can just as easily envision a scenario where the 911 call was made by the killer himself.
Hey. It's up for us.
We've already talked.
We don't have evidence that there was forced entry, so there's a good chance the person was an invited guest.
No.
It could be a crime of passion. It could have been something that started out innocently and turned bad. It could have been the domestic type argument.
Look, I'm gonna have to ask you to leave. What? This is now. Go ahead. Don't you? Stop it.
Things went too far. And when the person realized that he had hurt Jamie, he had remorse. And in that, he tried to, in several ways, get her help. He put a pillow under her head. He made an honest effort to get medical help for her.
Further bolstering the theory that the killer knew Jamie was his certainty when providing Jamie's address to the operator.
Send somebody, ambulance police to 1765 Stonehenge Court in Wheeling immediately.
1765 Stonehenge.
Stonehenge, well, I like the bush.
His familiarity with the area means that he had been there either several times before or had a specific reason to have the knowledge he did of the address as far as the numbers and the street and the pronunciation of the street.
Authorities believe that if the killer did know Jamie's symptoms, there is a strong likelihood he had set his sights on in the world of exotic dancing. Perhaps one of Jamie's clients couldn't take no for an answer. Perhaps one of her drivers had been nursing a secret passion that flared out of control. But every question leads to the same brick wall.
911 tape is a very important clue. We feel that with the identification of the voice and this tape, we can resolve this matter.
I'm always trying to figure out if I know the voice, if I know who that person is. I mean, I hear the urgency in his voice, and it just brings up all the emotions. I know what he's seen, and I know that I can't help her.
Feel that this person could give us some information, and I can understand why he didn't come forward and help us to relieve some of the pain of Jamie's death.
Here again is the actual 911 recording made in October of 1991. If you recognize the voice, contact the Wheeling, Illinois Police Department. Please listen closely.
What up, Vaughn?
Join me again next time for another intriguing edition of Unsolved Mysteries.
Right now, living with COPD is hard, but more could be going on.
Yeah, hitting the like does help the algorithm, Vaughn.
Your COPD may be different, and Nucala could help. The inflammation triggering your flare-ups could be caused by eosinophils. Nucala helps target that inflammation, and it's the only once-monthly auto-injector for COPD you can do right at home. Picture less flare-ups and less flare-up related hospital visits. Nucala is an add-on injection for uncontrolled COPD with a specific marker of inflammation. Nucala is not for sudden breathing problems. Allergic reactions can occur, including anaphylaxis. Get help right away for swelling of face, mouth, tongue, or trouble breathing. Infections that can cause shingles have occurred. Don't stop other medicines, including steroids, unless told by your doctor. Tell your doctor if you have a parasitic infection. It may cause back pain, diarrhea, and cough. Right now, it may be time for something different. And your doctor about Nucala.
You got heartburn? That sucks. You ate too many deviled eggs, huh?
For every mystery, there is someone who knows the truth. Perhaps that someone is watching. Perhaps it's you.
Unsolved Mysteries was really the first program that combined mystery genres into one. We were true crime, yes, but we were also unexplained phenomena. We were also lost loves. We were also missing persons. Unsolved was really unique, and there was really, at the time we were doing it, nothing like it on television. We were basically creating a new format. When the series started, I certainly didn't think that it was going to last as long as it did. I don't think anybody thought it would. I think everybody kind of went maybe a year, maybe 2 years, and then that'll be it. And suddenly, Unsolved was a big hit.
The audience really liked Unsolved Mysteries. First of all, it was about a mystery. Mystery shows have done well on TV. If you look at the schedule, there's always a bunch of them. And these are unsolved true stories, which makes it even better.
Over the years, it's been amazing to see that Unsolved Mysteries has become a household name. Before the series, you would hear people say, well, that's a mystery. But now, more often than not, I hear them say, well, that's an unsolved mystery.
It was so unique. It was the first show of its kind that, really engaged the audience as part of the storytelling process. And it's what really fueled the success, because the fans would help solve the case, and then we would do updates, and they'd come back for more. The show was so talkable. Audiences would watch it that night, and then the next day they'd want to talk about what happened. So it just became really like water cooler TV.
By the time we got to season 4, our ratings were really good. We were typically, certainly in the top 20 shows most weeks. Many weeks were in the top 10, and we really had momentum. I think what's interesting is that this show set the stage, it set a certain kind of standard, a certain trend. In television, it changed the parameters. Because at that time, people weren't doing shows like this. And it really, I think that's why people still like the show today, because it was unique and it was kind of like had its own style, and people really responded to that.
You're making something out of nothing.
Well, it's something to me.
Unsolved Mystery, it was a series, a series of specials that John Terry had done for NBC called Have You Seen This Person? People started to figure out, well, wait a second, we can do all sorts of stories that are mysteries that will fall under the umbrella of a show called Mysteries.
When we launched the weekly series in October of 1988, we had already produced 7 Unsolved Mystery specials that NBC had put in different places all over their schedule, and they didn't give us any promotion, they didn't give us any publicity. We were just kind of being tested out, I think, because they wanted to see if the audience would be interested enough in the show to try and find us.
The very first special surprised the heck out of everybody because they did really well.
Every week, we bring you the most intriguing stories from across the country.
I think when we went to series, people were really stunned. The whole Hollywood community, nobody had heard of us. They called up and said, Unsolved Mysteries, who are you guys?
I really didn't know if the series would be a success or not. I wasn't sure if the audience would come back each week to see stories that didn't even have endings. These are unsolved cases. But then what we started to see was the show actually created endings, and the audience was coming back to see what cases had been solved or if there were any updates for the cases. And it all just took off from there.
What are you afraid of? The dark? Flying?
Bob Chase was an ideal child. He had that deep, gravelly voice. He had gravitas, that feeling of whatever he says is true. He was legendary.
You're on a dark, lonely road. The shadows seem to reach for you.
That voice was just so perfect at telling the stories, getting people involved. And also, I think people really liked him as a person because he was a very likable guy. And he was a Hollywood icon.
Join on Wednesday for our next edition of Unsolved Mysteries.
We shot a lot of his stand-ups on location and oftentimes at night to make it creepier, with the fog and the trench coat. And sometimes it was cold and damp out, but he was a real trooper. He never complained once.
Join this intriguing new mystery, as well as these fascinating cases. Please, John.
Working with Bob Stack as a director was always a pleasure because he was so easy to work with, and he obviously knew how to hit his mark and say his lines like a super pro. We did have one time though that we ran into some problems.
I know, sweetheart. I know.
We had this scene where Bob had to hold a dog. And no matter how we had him hold the dog was squirming and Bob Stack was having trouble and he was kind of swearing under his breath. At the beginning, he was trying to be a trooper and get through it. But after a while, he says, I can't hold this dog. I'm sorry.
Other than that, would you like to show Mrs. Lincoln?
Whenever I'm talking about unsolved mysteries, one of the questions that people always ask me is, how did you ever find all the stories that you produced?
When we return, a cold-blooded killer strikes at a scenic restaurant in the wilderness.
It's hard for people to remember the tools that we had back in the late 80s and 90s were so different in making television. The research was a lot more difficult in finding stories back in the day. A lot of times cold calling, we would just call up police stations and we would call up local newspaper and we would just ask if there were stories that they had.
We divided up the country state by state and made contacts in those states. And when we hear of a good story, we call our contacts to help us flesh them out. We weren't just looking for unsolved murders and missing persons and wanted fugitives. We wanted any kind of story imaginable. Missing heirs, treasure, lost loves, UFOs, even legendary creatures like Bigfoot. We had over 20 different categories of mysteries.
I think one of the most popular UFO stories we did was about 3 people who were driving down a highway in Texas. It was at night.
Wow, what's that like?
And they see these big lights in the sky. It's shaped like a diamond. They get out of the car to investigate, and this heat is radiating from this UFO.
And I'm still there looking up to try to figure out what this object was.
After this happened, these 3 people found radiation burns on their bodies, and they were totally traumatized. The military said nothing strange had happened in the area that night, but something happened to those people.
On one, you're there.
One of my favorite stories was about a man who claimed he was reincarnated from a World War II submariner who had died during the war.
I was in my bunk when the attack happened.
The fact that he had all these details about what had happened on the submarine, down to what he was wearing, where he was in the submarine, and that we were able to fact check with the actual story of this man.
With each session, more details emerge. Details that appeared to come from the life of James Edward Johnston.
I still can't understand how someone, this is before the internet, could have such specific details and information about another person's life who they never knew, and they had died years before. You just cannot make this stuff up.
Here, Ben. Ben, very good granddaughter. Look at her.
back in the days before there was an internet, the way we would find stories was through a clipping service. And what they did was they sent newspapers to people all over the country whose job it was to go through those papers, local newspapers, find stories in the categories that we sent them, and literally cut those out of the newspaper and send them to us. And when you get paid dirt, when you found a clipping of a great story, there was nothing like it. You would get goosebumps.
One of the most dramatic stories that we did was the story of a young woman. Her name was Angela Hammond, who was abducted from a phone booth while she was talking to her fiance.
Airplane's vibrant fragrances are infused with 2 times more essential oils. The advanced plug-in with a boost button and anti-fade technology can keep your home always inviting for up to 70 days. That's a lot of inviting. Always fragrant, always inviting. Airplane's vibrant fragrances are infused with 2 times more essential oils. The advanced plug-in with a boost button and anti-fade technology can keep your home always inviting for up to 70 days. That's a lot of inviting. Always fragrant, always inviting. Airplane's vibrant fragrances are infused with 2 times more essential oils. The advanced plug-in with a boost button and anti-fade technology can keep your home always inviting for up to 70 days. That's a lot of inviting. Always fragrant, always inviting. Airplane's vibrant fragrances.
Oh my God, how many times are they going to show this commercial?
2 times more essential oils. The advanced plug-in with a boost button and anti-fade technology can keep your home always inviting for up to 70 days. That's a lot of inviting. Always fragrant, always inviting.
While we're talking on the phone, she mentioned to me about trucks slipping around the block, an older model, green and Ford pickup truck.
It's slipping around the block. No.
He's probably not around here. Maybe he's just lost.
Anyway, do you still want to go back this week?
Angie remained unconcerned until the truck parked next to the phone booth.
He's right next to the phones.
And she gave a description of the guy, and she gave a description of the truck.
He's wearing glasses and he's wearing overalls.
Maybe I should come down.
Oh, Rob, no, I'm sure it's okay.
And that's when I heard string my phone.
The fiance is on the phone. He rushes to get to this parking lot, and he sees the truck driving away. His car breaks down, actually, and he watches his girlfriend being abducted and driving off, and she's never been found.
We received a lot of tips for the Angela Hammond story because the fans really locked into this really unique clue, which was there was this fish decal on the back of the truck that the abductor had. And even to this day, they're still out there looking for her and the truck because the story's still unsolved.
And I think the audience really related to Angela's terror and to her fiance's desperation to try and save her. It was a sad story.
There were certain things that we learned to look for that would make a story really engaging and resonant for viewers. One of those things is twists and turns. So we would look for the unusual, we would look for the emotional, we would look for the relatable. Our viewers could really identify with the people in our stories because they were just like them. And so I think that was a really powerful part of the appeal of the show.
The Whackers are quiet, unassuming people who tend to mind their own business.
Yeah.
Hardly the type to draw the wrath of an unseen enemy.
One of the more popular stories we did was about a married couple that was being absolutely terrorized by anonymous phone calls, threatening notes, and even violent attacks. And I think that what the viewers responded to in that story was the fear that this couple felt, knowing that they were being watched and never knowing when their assailant was going to strike again. As the show became more popular, we started getting huge piles of mail from viewers. Some of it was fan mail for Robert Stack, but a lot of the letters were from viewers wanting us to feature their stories. I actually think the majority of the stories we produced were submitted by Unsolved Mysteries viewers.
8 years ago, the little town of East Millinocket, Maine was safe and secure. The last place you'd expect a brutal murder to occur.
We did a story called Maine Petition, which took place in a small town. And it's one of those stories that we might not have done. It might not have come to the attention of the researchers if the people in the town hadn't sent in a petition. I think it was 6,000 signatures asking us to do this story.
I saw Joyce. She wasn't moving. Her body looked like it had been beaten.
And that case was eventually solved. Joyce's killer was identified.
One of the things we set out to do from the very beginning was to find stories that had a scary or creepy element to them, because let's face it, people do like to be scared.
You're about to have a rare and disturbing opportunity to go inside the mind of an arsonist.
There was this one story we did called Unknown Arsonist, where a guy found a jacket on the side of the road. There was a videotape in the jacket, pulled out the videotape, played it.
Look at me no more. This is what I've been doing. Weeks for chasing. I'm several doing. I'm several doing.
The person who had set the fire was narrating the tape, like he was watching the fire happen and narrating it at the same time. It was very creepy. Once we aired the show, I think 1,000 tips came in, and the police ended up solving it, and it turned out to be 2 juveniles that had set like 25 other fires.
I think one of the most incredible paranormal stories we produced was about a nurse by the name of Teresita Bassa.
It was going to be a fucking scene unoccupied. But the fireman made a grim discovery.
Teresita was brutally murdered in her apartment in Chicago, and there were no suspects. Police were at a total dead end.
A Chicago couple claimed that the victim, Teresita Bassa, had named her own killer after she was murdered, speaking to them from beyond the grave.
A woman that Teresita used to work with started going into trances, and she would speak in the voice of Teresita. His name is Alan Showery. And she actually named Teresita's killer. And it turned out she was right. Alan Showery was his name, and he was arrested. And he was so freaked out by how police were able to track him down that he confessed to Teresita's murder in the courtroom. That is one story I will always remember.
When you're talking about unsolved mysteries, one of the key factors is the music. It scared the heck out of people. We get letters from people who say, it's been 30 years and I'm still scared by the unsolved mysteries music. It is a key part of the show because it sets up the atmosphere of weirdness and scariness. We love to go to scary movies, and Unsolved Mysteries is able to tap into that feeling.
What's surprising to me is 35 years later, when people either hear Unsolved Mysteries, they go, oh my God, that theme song. Or if they hear the theme song, they go, oh my God, I remember that. I remember climbing under the couch. That music scared me so much.
I think that combination of that music and Robert Stack's voice were key elements on why the show was so popular.
When we first produced the Unsolved Mysteries specials, John and I were on location all the time. But once the series began, we were just too busy to go out on the road. So all the series producers and the series directors got to go out and they got to have all the fun, and they came home with some great stories about production.
One of the best things of Unsolved Mysteries was that we shot on location in the places with the people that were involved in that mystery. And for some places, it was the first time they'd ever seen a TV film crew come into their town. And they would just roll the red carpet out. We'd be on local news. I mean, it's kind of hysterical to think today with all the reality television. But those days, it was very unusual sometimes for places that we went to. And everybody could not have been more friendly, more helpful. And I think that helped a lot in solving a lot of the mysteries.
Law enforcement agencies in the smaller towns were incredibly helpful. They'd give us helicopter support, and they would give us vehicles and actual officers for our recreations. I mean, they would close off highways for us, but it was always a little bit risky. I remember one shoot, we probably had the entire police department helping us recreate a crime scene, and we were just about to start shooting, and they got called to a real crime scene. And the crew was left just standing there with nothing to film. But they eventually came back, and we eventually got our scenes.
I'm James Dad. Do you remember me? Mr. Sharp.
When you go to the small town, you can't get actors because you're far away sometimes from a major city. And you do want to work with the real people.
Excuse me. Where are you from?
I'm from Brooklyn.
That's what I thought you said. What section?
What we found is that we got tricky because when it was an emotional story or something with a murder or somebody died, the family, it would almost bring in the tears sometimes. It was really hard to watch.
Well, we just completed all the tests on your little girl, and I'm afraid that the results confirm that she's going to need a complete blood transfusion.
A lot of times we have people that aren't necessarily actors, or certainly not good actors. So we had people who were overacting, people who were underacting, and people who were not acting at all. Sometimes people would even play themselves. And that was always a problem too, because they'd be so nervous, and it was really tough. It was the directors had a big challenge a lot of times working with the actors.
Well, I knew her a little bit. Oh, good. Would you like to come down to the station and get a sit? Well, if you want to come with me.
We would go into a small town to do a story, and we would cast quote unquote actors, and they would all come from small theater groups. It's good to see you.
Hell, it's Fifi.
And so Unsolved was America's Little Theater.
I love that. That was totally uncalled for. She loves that little thing.
I love him too. That's why I want to spend more time with him. You get enough time to spend with him that he needs me.
The casting process was always a very interesting problem. What was most important for us was that the actors looked like the real people so the audience wouldn't get confused. And their ability to act wasn't nearly as important.
One time we did a story about a fugitive who was on the lam, and we cast a guy who looked exactly like him. The show aired, and someone called in that the fugitive was eating at a restaurant. So they sent the police over, and they arrested him, but it was the actor, not the fugitive.
So after that, we decided to start giving the actors who played bad guys a card they could carry around with them to prove to law enforcement that if they were ever arrested, that they were just an actor and they were not a wanted fugitive.
Is your cat too cool for the holidays? You have the temptations for me for rest.
Everyone's gearing up for the holidays. The best friend is happy together. And the first time. The neighborhood hero. And the odd timers. And it all comes together in Chevrolet.
Current qualified lessees can get this 2026 Equinox for around $269 a month. Or 0% financing on all 2026 Equinox models should be financed with GM Financial.
We did have one time though that we had to cast a scene where these two guys robbed somebody, and we're calling people in to, audition, and so we have them do a little quick improv. So these two guys come in and they do the improv, and they scared everybody in the room. They're like did the perfect robbery. They like strong armed the person. They gave them a look, and we're all like, oh my god, how did? So I asked them. I said, how come you go? What do you guys really do? They go, oh, we're really robbers. That's what we do. So they got the part.
When the actors didn't match the real people quite as well as we needed them to, we would use makeup and wigs to help create a better match. And some of the wigs and mustaches actually made matters worse, I think. Looking back on some of those recreations, they were just too funny. There's actually an Instagram account called Wigs of Unsolved that one of our fans put together, and it's dedicated to the ridiculous looking wigs of Unsolved Mysteries.
Another funny part about actors is we would come into town and we would do local casting, and anytime we would ask an actor if they could do something like drive a stick shift car or ride a horse or swim or drive a boat, they would always say yes. So we did a story once about a couple, and they were horse riders. And so when we cast the lookalike actor, asked him if he rode a horse. Oh yeah, I grew up on horses. I've ridden horses all my life.
We hired these two. They got them up on a horse and they were riding along the side of the road. Supposed to be a nice romantic, ride together to establish their love relationship.
And the horse just takes off, just galloping away from the set.
Facts. And you could see he had no idea how to control this horse. He was hanging on for dear life. Luckily, the woman was a good horsewoman, and she was able to catch up to his horse, stop the horse before he fell off and really hurt himself.
Needless to say, there were no horse riding scenes with him after.
Have you got the note? The note from the parking garage.
For the most part, the actors in our recreations were actors who were just starting out in their careers. But sometimes some of those actors would actually become really famous.
Daniel Day Kim was one actor who was cast on Unsolved. He played the relative of a murder victim. And Cheryl Hines, too. She played the mother of a child who was almost murdered by her nanny.
Can you tell me how this happened?
She apparently had some sort of seizure and fell and hit her head.
How far was the fall?
It wasn't far. She just fell on the floor. I don't know. I wasn't there. She was with the nanny.
Perhaps the most famous of those actors was Matthew McConaughey.
What, honey, look.
Who played a murder victim in one of our stories.
And we all still laugh because the episode was shot in Texas before Matthew even moved to LA, and it was in the summer and it was hot. So the director told Matthew he could take his shirt off for the scene where the character was mowing the lawn. Now Matthew McConaughey is very famous for his shirtless scenes.
And Matthew McConaughey had to do a fairly robust death scene. He was working in his garage. He was shot by a man who pulled up with a shotgun.
Larry had been shot 4 times in the chest and once in the head by a .22 pistol.
Let's just say that his acting has come a long way since then. And in fact, he did an appearance on The Tonight Show, and he referred to the Unsolved Mysteries story and that segment as his first big break
in Hollywood.
It was a big challenge making TV in those days. I remember when computers came out and you had its own suitcase lugging it around, and the first Motorola cell phones that were this brick that we were so excited that we could call from set. And we also shot on film, which requires so much more lighting. Sometimes on a night shoot, you'd spend the first 6 hours lighting, and then you got the other half a day to do the shooting. And now you put up one light and you're ready to go.
I think the hardest part of producing Unsolved Mysteries was that essentially we were shooting a mini movie in 4 or 5 days with actors and costumes and vehicles.
There were a lot of challenges on the production end. Sometimes you'd end up with huge set pieces because it'd be a big crime or some kind of event happening. And a lot of the directors, we came from the documentary world where we were used to sitting back and just recording and documenting what was going on. Suddenly, we've got actors, we've got props, we've got period pieces. I think it really spurred the creativity because John and Terry weren't telling us, they weren't saying, no, don't do this, don't do that, do things this way. They were saying, just go out there and get your story because we trust your judgment.
I think one of the most memorable stories that I directed was a story called Casey Blast. It was a story about 6 firefighters who died while fighting fire at a construction site. So as a director, I had to try to find a way to recreate this moment so the audience really feels what the firefighters were up against and the tragedy of what happened. So we tried to make it as real as we could. We exploded it, and we brought in some dummies and put them in firefighter suits. There's shots where you see what looks like firefighters getting blown away, literally, by the fire. And I felt like we really were able to capture that moment and how tragic this really was.
The 41, the number 30, and to the number 41, the number 30.
For some reason, this one really hit home for me because these were firefighters. They're just doing their job, trying to, save property, and they died in the process. So it's hard for us as a crew to sort of hear those kinds of stories.
Look at this.
Yeah.
It's a weird trick.
One of the most memorable stories in Unsolved was Bigfoot. We rented the Harry and the Hendersons Bigfoot costume, and we hired this 6'7" actor to wear the costume. He was a rather foreboding figure. One of the sightings in the Bigfoot story took place outside of a bar at 2:00 in the morning when the crowd came out. And so we're set up and we're filming and we're filming and we're filming, and the bar closes. And half a dozen patrons come out of the bar. Clearly, they've been imbibing most of the evening. And the Bigfoot goes by. A couple of people scream, and one of the guys actually jumped off the curb and chased the Bigfoot. And the entire crew lost it. Everybody broke up because it was just hysterical. It was one of the best moments in the 14 years I worked for the show.
On March 1st, at exactly 7:27 p.m., tragedy struck the West End Baptist Church.
There was a story we did called The Lucky Choir. And it was a story about a church that had an explosion, a gas heater went.
All 10 to 12 people showed up late that day. So it blew up and there was nobody inside the church. We found a little abandoned church in the state where this had happened, and they were going to let us blow it up.
And so we hired a special effects fellow. And the director said, don't go too far. We don't want to rattle the windows in the neighborhood.
And he completely overdid the amount of dynamite and explosives inside the church.
Boom, boom. It was a huge explosion. It didn't rattle the windows. It broke windows for about 5 or 6 blocks all around.
And also, not only did it explode, but all these pieces of wood started flying and hitting the huts. And the producer almost got stabbed by a piece of wood coming through. So I guess it was kind of a second miracle that nobody was injured.
The story began with a violent story, July 2nd, 1947.
As a director, probably my best memory is the Roswell UFO story. We built a 2-scale replica of the flying saucer that someone claimed to have seen crash in a gully in New Mexico. We created alien beings based on eyewitness accounts. That's really the first time that I felt like I was making a movie.
One of the strangest stories that I ever directed was a story called Rain Boy. This guy was possessed and he had the capacity to make it rain inside. If you're going to have it rain inside, you have to have what's called a wet set, which means that you build the set at a 30-degree angle so all the water runs off into a trough that is then recovered. We ended up putting sprinklers off camera in the ceiling, and we just basically turned them on and off to create the effect.
We had to waterproof the living room floor, walls, and furniture. And then after each take, quickly rush in and squeegee off the floors.
In between every take, it was like 35 or 40 minutes for the second take. The actor's hair was wet. The actor's wardrobe was wet.
We had industrial dryers to dry the soaked clothes, and our poor wardrobe supervisor really had to work cut.
It was a nightmare.
It's your fault. You made it rain in the living room. You made it rain. It's you, Johnny. You're the one that's doing it, and you probably made me stop.
The pots and pans were over stove and started rattling. So I got levitated off the floor.
We used a hidden harness to levitate the actor and bungee rig to slingshot him across the room.
It wasn't like somebody taking your hand and pushing you. It was like feeling it all over your body.
One of the weirdest things about Rain was that on the morning we left, all the crew was on the same floor in the hotel. And there was 2 inches of water in everyone's room, including the hallway outside of the bunk.
I called the hotel manager who said there wasn't a plumbing problem and there was nothing to explain it.
So whether or not it was a supernatural force that was instigated by the Rain Boy, who in fact we had interviewed during the show, I'll leave it to you.
Stories, we also employed special effects for things like car crashes and stunts, and those were very real because those were created by real Hollywood stuntmen.
Something beautiful, Kate Spade. Everyone gearing up for the holidays. The best friend. Happy to be back. And the first time. The neighborhood hero. And the odd timers. And it all comes together in a Chevrolet.
Current qualified lessees can get this 2026 Equinox. Full runs $269 a month. Or get 0% financing on all 2026 Equinox models through finance with GM Financial.
Everyone's gearing up for the holidays. The best friend. Happy to be back. And the first time. The neighborhood hero. And the odd timers. And it all comes together in a Chevrolet.
Current qualified lessees can get this 2026 Equinox. Full runs $269 a month. Or get 0% financing on all 2026 Equinox models through finance with GM Financial.
we got a story where this guy lived in a small town and for some reason jumped on an airplane to leave the town. What a story. I mean, like, we're like, okay, wait a minute. Now we're going to show this guy getting on the wing and the plane taking off with the guy on the wing. Like, how are we going to do that? We had to have a stunt pilot who could fly the plane. We had to find a stunt guy who would be willing to get on the wing. We made special rigging so the person could hang on the plane and you couldn't see it on the camera. And I couldn't watch. I mean, I did watch, but I was like, I can't believe we're doing this. And we did pull it off. Nobody got hurt. And you know what? It was amazing. They solved the case. The whole mystery was who was this guy and why did he jump on the plane? We were actually able to identify him and find out.
As the seasons went on, we got more complex with stunts and with special effects, and we were able to do much bigger stories. One that I produced was about a woman who had actually gotten run over by a boat on the lake, but it was a hit and run. So to do that reenactment, we actually had to jump like boats over each other off of a ramp. They had to build the ramp in the water. We had to put a camera, in the boat. It took multiple nights of shooting. I was hurt, and I would just always be so happy when it was over and we were done and we got what we needed.
We were working on a story about a murder that happened inside a trailer that was burning. So I had literally 4 or 5 people running around inside a burning trailer, and we're trying to figure out how to do this and make it look real. And what they did was they piped the inside of the trailer with like you turn on your gas stove, like gas lines that they could turn on and turn off. Literally would go action, they turn it on, the fire would start, we'd run it for like 2 or 3 minutes because we couldn't burn the walls because then it would look burned. At the end of the whole stunt, we did burn down the trailer, but it was a really tricky stunt.
One of the great things about Unsolved Mysteries for the audience and also for us as producers is that we traveled all over the world.
The most memorable international story that I directed was Monk's Curse. We spent 2 nights in the Egyptian Museum. We were in the treasure room with all the treasures that Howard Carter had pulled out of the tomb. The life mask of Tutankhamun is likely the most iconic artifact ever created by the human race. It's really awesome.
In Turkey, we searched for Noah's Ark, and we did the miracle at Fatima in Portugal. We filmed a number of cases in Mexico, Nazca Blinds in Peru, and in the South Pacific, we did a story about Amelia Earhart.
Where you go? Amelia Earhart. What is that doing here?
One of the most interesting episodes I produced was about Anastasia. This was in the early 90s, and Russia had just opened up.
But I would like to see the pictures.
So the challenge of shooting in Russia was so complex. First of all, we only took a couple of Americans and hired everybody else locally. So that means everything had to be translated because very few Russians spoke English.
And so the great riddle continues. Is the body of Grand Duchess Anastasia hidden in a shallow grave near the spot where the rest of her family was found? Anastasia somehow survived the assassination, only to emerge years later as the eccentric Anna Anderson.
They were trying to prove that Anastasia wasn't in the grave. And there was a number of women who had claimed to be Anastasia, and she was still alive. They had just exhumed these bodies, and they literally laid out the entire family in this room so they could figure out who was who. And so we were ushered into this room. It was really astounding. It was just like watching history.
I think everyone who worked on the show and all the viewers probably have their own favorite Unsolved Mysteries case from the show. One of the really creepy and puzzling stories we did was about a woman named Cindy James who had been terrorized by an unknown assailant for 7 years. I mean, these attacks were crazy. Again, a knife put through her hand. She was found unconscious numerous times.
There was no independent corroboration. Cindy saw this person, or sometimes she said there was 2, sometimes 3 people.
And she was eventually found dead in the yard of an abandoned house. But then it turned out that there was a chance she had dissociative identity disorder, and one of her identities was actually the source of the attacks.
Why are you doing this to me?
Then the theory became that one of her personalities had ultimately killed her. The question was, did she really have an unknown assailant?
Really know that Harry went.
We did an episode about a psychic artist.
During the past 4 decades, Carl Code has drawn more than 100,000 eerie portraits.
She would go to big groups of people and she would touch the person's hand, and then just with a pad and a pencil, she would sketch a portrait of someone that had gone beyond, but that was related somehow to the person.
And I honestly don't quite know how I do it. I just sense them. Also, there is an element of what we call automatic control. I think somebody takes over my hand and gives me a certain amount of help in getting the drawings accurate.
After we finished the episode, I asked if she could do a portrait for me. So she did one with an older lady. I didn't recognize it. She was a little frustrated, so she said, let me do another one. Did another one, older man, didn't recognize him. But I took sketches with me, and I went home, and my mom said, those are my grandparents. And she went and got photos of my great-grandparents, who I never met and didn't know that what they looked like. And the pictures that she showed me were so close to the sketches, they ended up using them in the episode, against the photograph of the real people.
Morning coffee at Kay and Mike Fletcher was hardly ranked as an unsolved mystery until the peculiar events of February 11th, 1996. It happened just after 9 a.m.
One of the creepiest stories that we ever did was about a phenomenon called spontaneous human combustion.
A perfectly normal person burst into flame without warning and without apparent cause.
One of the challenges in that story was the recreation, because we had to literally set somebody on fire. So how do you do that? Well, we used something called a fire suit, which a stunt person would put on, and the fire suit was coated with a flammable gel that you could actually set on fire. One of the things that happened is when we aired the story, we would get calls at our phone center from viewers who were scared that that was going to happen to them.
The crushing Capone in Chicago, Elliot Ness became one of the most respected lawmen in the country.
One story we produced was about the real Elliot Ness. It was about the only case that he'd never solved, and Bob loved doing that story. That was one of his favorites. In the early 60s, Bob played the role of Elliot Ness in The Untouchables, and I think he really identified with Ness as a crime fighter.
Like these guys are in New Jersey now.
And he brought sort of the gravitas of Elliot Ness to this role as a host of Unsolved Mysteries.
He really loved this show. He loved being involved in it. He loved the mysteries. He always wanted to know what was the backstory. He was a big proponent of the show and a big champion of the show.
Update. Within minutes of our broadcast, 2 viewers called our 800 number to report that they recognized Arthur Fleming.
It was pretty cool when cases started to be solved because people watching had a stake in the show.
Even the first season, the case was solved.
June 21st, 1986. Gail delivered the restaurant that Rose. He's a blind date.
The first story I directed was about a young woman named Gail Delore, disappeared.
If anyone watching tonight has seen Gail Delore or knows anything about her mysterious disappearance, please contact the Maine State Police.
And the thought among police and her family was that she was answering personal ads and she may have been abducted by one of the people that she connected with. The show aired, and someone who worked in the morgue in a small town in Alabama recognized Gail's photograph from Unsolved Mysteries and in fact solved the mystery. And that was the moment that I realized that this was
a different kind of show.
The minute that we solved the mystery, it exploded. Even more people started to watch. It was unbelievable.
Tonight we present an unusual update about Lost Love.
Nobody loves anything more than hearing Bob Stack say the word update, because then you know the mystery's been solved.
When we got it solved, we were in scrambling. The next time we were on the air, we wanted to update the audience as quickly as we could. We sent crews out to do interviews and to get footage, and we may have had a show that was all ready to go, and suddenly we're rearranging everything because we need to free up 5 minutes of time. So we always had extra stories so we could swap stories in and how it shows as needed.
When the guy from Unsolved Mysteries called me, said that Peggy'd seen me on television, seen me.
One of the things we had to do, of course, was to pull Bob Sack in. Sometimes we would want to film him on camera. It was never just like, oh, an update, great, it's on the air. There was a lot that went on behind the scenes to make that happen.
When the series first began, the viewers were told to write to a P.O. box, and we got bags and bags full of viewer mail. Then we went to an 800 number where people would call the phone center, and we called that the telecenter.
For the past 7 years, the phone center has been an integral part of our operation.
This was a huge room, almost like a warehouse in Los Angeles. And there were probably 50 operators, all sitting at desks, each with a phone in front of them.
And emotions and private schools and lady practice and that freestyle cream, but not you, man. All right, how much should I discount what you're saying because you're coming off a very bitter divorce? 20%. You're up to the place.
This is for real my last smoke of the night. I'm going to bed. What up, everyone who's watching? Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, I'm done my last smoke of the night. Donate on Cash App if you can. It'd be greatly appreciated.
The joy of whole room freshness. Glade plug-in scented oil fan.
All around you don't even know it.
It's the only freshener to use a continuous built-in fan.
It's just there in the air.
Unlike some fresheners that seem strong just around the outlet, the Glade fan continuously circulates fragrance throughout your whole room.
This shit'll blow your motherfucking mind. Magic everywhere in this bitch.
Plug-in scented oil fan from Glade. The
pure motherfucking magic
of fragrance.